Good morning, everybody. So, today we will tackle on the importance of ecological and diversity studies in the conservation of biodiversity here in our country. So, I'm very much thankful guests that I have invited for giving me a little bit of their time. No, alam ko po busy po kayo lahat, pero sabi niyo nga kanina habang nagkukwentuhan tayo, this is your opportunity as well na magkwentuhan. Pero ipasok ko lang natin dun sa topic at least, no, for now. So let me start introducing our panel of experts for today. So from Center for Conservation Innovation Philippines, the president of CCIP, Dr. Neil Aldrin Malyari. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. From Isla Biodiversity Conservation, Ms. Cynthia Layusa Oliveira. Ma'am Cynthia.
Sorry. Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. From Crocodilus Porosus Philippines Incorporated, Mr. Rainier Manalo. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.
Nasa fieldwork kasi si sir eh. From another panel of experts from Katala Foundation Incorporated, Miss Indira Lacerna Windman. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Maayong buntag. Salamat sa pagbita.
Thank you, ma'am. Of course, from the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, Dr. Teresa Mundita Lim. Good morning, ma'am.
Morning to everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this dialogue.
Thank you, ma'am. So, meron tayong surprise guest. Surprise guest kasi kahapon siya nag-reply. Ngayon lang nakita ni ma'am yung message ko. So, from the Energy Development Corporation, EDC, in Mindanao, Ms. Marisol Pedregosa. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Sorry, late na ako response.
Ma'am. So, the focus group discussion was intended for my students and for them to learn on not only on ecology, but the importance of ecology to other fields that are important nation building in our country. So to start off this focus group discussion, gaya nga ng sabi ko kanila ma'am kanina, so let's begin this universe question. So my question is, what inspired to pursue a career in biodiversity conservation, or at least in the conservation of biodiversity in the country, or conservation? So let's start with Ma'am Indira. Ma'am Indira, what was your inspiration to pursue this career?
Uy, akala ko ako yung last. Anyway. Surprise! So ano ba ang inspiration? I would say I would blame it to my husband, who's a hardcore scientist, field biologist. And after that, the spark moment is when I first saw the cockatoos on the island of Rasa in Nara. And I felt in love with the species, although mahaba yung aking kwento, pero to cut short, talagang na-in love ka sa species na you are working on. And then eventually, when the years go by, ay nakita mo na it's not only working about the species, but it's really working with the people towards the conservation of the species. So yun po ang aking side.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am Mundita, what was your inspiration po of doing this kind of work?
Hi, thank you, Eric. Akala ko rin last ako eh.
Hindi, ma'am.
Surprise. Yeah. So, well, my mom on her stories of Sierra Madre was my first exposure to what nature can contribute. Yun yung nung bata pa ako, and then later on I took up veterinary medicine. So yung exposure ko was more on animals, and then I was fascinated by wildlife. So I worked on marine turtles, and then eventually I went to Kalawit, so that gave me more appreciation on unique the uniqueness of wild animals. And then eventually, uh, uh, as I pursued my career, I realized na hindi lang pala, you don't just treat wild animal. If you handle wild animals, you also look at the habitat and all the interaction that they have with the ecosystems, the plants, and the people.
Thank you, ma'am. Yung ating surprise guest, Ma'am Sol, what was your inspiration?
Kasalanan to ni na Aldrin, Arvin, tsaka ni Ompong eh. Okay. Ayan, si Dr. Aldrin Malyari, isa yun sa mga higher batch sa UP dati sa Los Baños. So, ang course ko kasi sa is BS Biology major and Cell Biology. Pero nung makulit tong mga to eh. Kumbaga, Sol, sama ka. Mag fieldwork eh. Yung dorm ko nasa nasa forestry lang ng UPLB. So, nung kinakatok nila ako parate, sama ako. So, sama ako ng sama. So, una, yung thesis ko ay sa kamote. Alam mo naman to ni Aldin, kamote. Tapos, huwag ka nang magkamote, mga ngamote ka dyan. Tapos sabi niya. Tapos nung so na-inlove ako sa wildlife actually. Nung una kong akyat na kasama sila, na natuto akong kung yung wala talaga sa laboratory, natuto akong mag-misnet, mag-handle ng ibon, ng panike, humawak ng palaka, mag-grab ng mga ahas, yun. So doon, from there, na-inlove ako sa cell bio. So nag-proceed ako nung masters ko sa wildlife studies. So nagsimula na doon hanggang dumating na ako dito.
Thank you, Ma'am Sol. So, tatanong natin yung nag-impinsa ka mo sa'yo. Dr. Aldrin, ano po ang mas niyo ron? What about you, sir? What was your inspiration?
Thanks. Binuking mo ko, Sol. Sige, booking. Laglagan na tayo, ha? I suppose nag-work yung ploy o yung strategy na ginamit sa amin. Kasi nung nasa kolehiyo kami, nakatambay lang kami doon sa labas sa Biosci building na yan, kasama namin si Sol at walang buwis buhay nung college masaya lang. And I wanted to be a medical doctor noon. Kaya lang, yung aming Brad sa symbiosis, ganun din parang kami, sumama ka na lang sa amin sa field. So sinama kami sa Kalawit nandito. So pareho tayo ng mga experiences. So sinama kami sa Kalawit, dinala kami doon for a month. For a week or so. At nahubad yung mga namin, yung mga kaeklata namin ng bata. At we began to like being out in the field, outdoors. And then that was in October, pagdating ng January, biglang sama kayo dito sa isang expedition. Same brad namin si Hector Miranda. Sama kayo dito sa expedition na ito. Sinama kami sa Sierra Madre. And unbeknownst to us, kala namin cutie-cutie lang katulad sa Palawan, 1 week. Yung pala 4 or 5 months. So we stayed in the field for 4 or 5 months. At doon, umiyak, tumawa, nagalit, lahat. But we got the full-on experience of being in the field, experiencing the hardships of being in the field, and the beauty and the wonder of nature. Doon ako una nakakita, that was early 1990s o 1991, habang nagtatransect, may 20 hornbills sa malalaki at the end of the transect at about 5 p.m. So imagine nyo na booming sound. So long and short of the story is that people pushed me to experience it. and gave those opportunities. So yun yung inspiration. If people give you that opportunity, grab it and see how it goes. And you know, the rest is history. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yun actually talaga, at least for now, no? Ang hirap ma-in love nung students natin to what we are doing in the field. Kasi wala sila talagang at least hands-on experience or wala silang exposure. Kaya rin ginawa ko tong focus group discussion series na to. Ma'am Cynthia, did you have a similar inspiration?
Ako kasi nung bata ako, matanda na sila. Kailangan ko lang sabihin. Medyo nakakahiya na naging part ako ng panel na ito. Na-realize ko ngayon. Kasi nung pumasok ako sa career ng conservation, mga kilala na sila. Pero sige, represent ko na lang yung age group ko. Yan. Kami yung mga, I suppose, yung mga next in line. Yung sa akin naman kasi, hindi naman din kasi talaga kahit noon yung sa time ko, hindi uso talaga yung career sa conservation. So it's either mag-IT ka, nurse, doctor, teacher, ganun pa rin yung uso nun. Pero ako, through Nat Geo pa rin, mas napapanood ko siya sa TV. So hindi ko na-realize na career siya. Mas ko lang siya na napapanood ko siya sa TV. Yung ganun. Tapos nung high school ako, nagkaroon ako ng opportunity magkaroon ng immersion sa Zambales. Tapos nakita yung immersion namin with yung Aita community and at the same time yung doon mismo sa support doon mismo sa site nila. So nakita ko na ang ganda ng environment. So gusto ko mag-work sa ganung field. Siguro nadulot na rin sa mahilig ako magbiyahe pero wala akong pera. So sabi ko nung college ako, maghahanap ako ng career na pwede ako magbiyahe na libre na part ng work. Tapos yung masaya rin. Hindi, kinonsider ko mag-vet, pero nung mag-a-apply ako ng college, na-realize ko hindi ako pang medical profession. Kasi masyado ako na-apektuhan emotionally kapag merong nahihirapan na animals. So yun, hindi ako biologist in training or ecologist, pero yung undergrad ko is on environmental planning and management. So mas landscape yung approach. So doon ko nakita yung different, yung ano pa yung mga different aspects pagdating sa environmental conservation na pwede kong patunguhan. So I chose to mag-NGO. Pero yung trabaho ko nun mas more on youth empowerment, mas policy, makikipag-usap sa LGUs. So yun, nangibabaw yung athletes, yung kati sa paanan, gusto mo talaga magbiyahe. So nag-volunteer ako para mag-survey ng humpback whales sa Babuyan Islands. Doon nagsimula lahat. So from humpback whale, at the same time kaka-discover lang din nila Ate Sol ng Calayan Rail sa Calayan Island. So napabilang ako doon. Nakilala ko yung community. Tapos nakita ko yung benefits ng doing conservation work. At yun na-mention din kanina ni Ma'am Indira na hindi lang dahil sa species, pero yung conservation kasama yung community. So mas doon ako na-encourage mag-pursue ng work. Kasi hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin ako marunong humawak ng palaka. Pero ang tingin ko sa conservation is really people and yung anthropology behind yung conservation, nakikita akong value. So yun. Salamat.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir Rainier, what about you, sir? What's your inspiration, sir?
Magandang umaga ulit. Ako kasi ang undergrad ko kasi fisheries. So more of utilization kami, yung orientation ko, aquaculture. So wala akong background on the conservation side. Pero since kailangan mo talaga magtrabaho, that time maghanap ka ng panibagong pagkakataan, sa bagong graduate. So napasok ako doon sa overseas. Nagtrabaho ako sa factory ng tuna. So ano siya, Japanese firm, Japanese company, bakbakan trabaho. So 10 hours a day nagpo-produce ka ng sashimi, doon kami nagtitimpla. Tapos na-experience kami sa pagbalik sa Pilipinas after 3 years, nag-apply ako sa Crocodile Farm Institute. Dahil bakit ako nag-apply kasi kilala ko dahil dahil kailangan lang ng pera, ganun lang siya muna. So, na-assign niya ako doon sa tagalinis ng mga crocodile, tangke. Sabi ko, anong mangyayari sa crocodiles pagkatapos nito? Dito na lang ba sila? Saan pa ba sila dapat pumunta? So nag-start na ako mag-research. Tiningnan ko na kung ano ba yung dapat sa kanila. Mas talaga dapat yung mga crocodiles. Then after yun, um, inassign ako ni Dr. Aquino sa field. Kasama ko si Cedric Pontillas. So naikot namin yung Pilipinas sa kakahanap ng populations ng crocodiles. Hanggang sa uh, year, when nangyari, year 2000, yun, inisip ko na meron pang ibang pupuntahan yung crocodiles, dapat hindi lang dito. Tapos mabilis kong na-pick up yung production niya. So, okay na sa side ng captive breeding, yung introduction naman sa wild para ibalik siya dahil nakita ko na nga yung dalawang side. Ayun, umpisa na doon lahat at nabigyan ng pagkakataon na maikot ko yung Pilipinas sa kakahanap lang ng buhaya. Hanggang ngayon, tuloy-tuloy pa rin kami. At yung conservation side na yung inaasikaso ko ngayon para sa ibalik siya sa wild kasi meron naman tayong captive breeding programs na successful na in the Philippines. So, anak ngayon.
Thank you, sir. So, conservation and conservation biology in general in the Philippines is a little bit of a younger science, and it's catching up in recent years, no, in both popularity and the information, no, of conservation to the masses. Now, as one of us, our experts, no, our panel of experts are generally the frontliners of conservation in the country. I would like to ask the panel, what would you say is the current status of conservation, biodiversity conservation in the Philippines in general? Sir Aldrin, your comments on this?
Wala ako talaga.
Oh, ikaw talaga, sir. Maiba lang.
Hindi ako ang pinakamatanda dito, ah.
Nagkakahalata na po ng edad.
Slight lang. Yeah, thank you for that wonderful question. I believe, Charat. Well, seriously, I think these are exciting times. Yung time natin ngayon, it's an age of growth and empowerment. More and more people, more and more students are getting into nature conservation and studying natural history. Sabi nga ni Sol kanina, nung time na nagsimula kami, would you believe na nung finally gumraduate kami after 6 years, tatlo lang kaming gumraduate na may ecology na major. BS Biology, 5,000, hindi pala, mga 1,000 plus graduates, tatlo lang kami ng gumraduate na may ecology major under BS Bio program. And the rest are either cell biology, microbiology, mostly springboard for medicine. So you could just imagine how kung depauperate ang Philippines, how depauperate we are in terms of people who are engaged in ecology. But now, may mga, every school has a Center for Biodiversity, which is great. Ang tawag dito, lumalaki yung appreciation for nature because a lot of those who've been trained in the past are now in the position to inspire students like yourselves. And because of that, the rate of discovery in the Philippines is staggering. It has increased by 1,000 folds, by leaps and bounds. Nung time kasi namin, nakikihila pa kami sa computer para makapag-type ng isang report. In fact, my undergraduate thesis was from yung unang draft ko was using an IBM electric typewriter and 3 copies and so on. So when we do research, when we do our papers, we have to go to the library, go to the card catalog and endorse stuff. Alam niyo pa ba ang card catalog ngayon, mga kapatid? Gumagamit pa ba kayo nun? Nowadays, you can just flip your mobile phone and you can do your search in Google Scholar. And so leaps and bounds yan. Noong panahon na yun, the GPS that we used was something like, it costed something like $4,000 each. And so for a scientific expedition, we had only one, and then we had someone to climb the tree para yung antenna makasagap ng signal, if at all sagap ng signal at makapenetrate sa cloud. But now, our mobile phones have GPSs now. Pag nagsa-survey, we can phone our loved ones. Noon, pag survey kami, we'll go to the next, after a few weeks, pagmaba kami to get supplies, punta kami sa munisipyo, tapos yan, sina Dr. Arvin, sina Ompong, punta kami sa munisipyo at magte-telegrama kami sa mga nanay at tatay namin at sa mga jowa namin. Sabi namin, we are safe, miss you. Yun lang, kasi mahal ang per letter or per word, at wala kaming pera nun. So, having said that, these are exciting times. Kung noon we had to compute for species diversity indices using columnar sheets that you buy sa bookstore. Alam niyo ba yung columnar sheet na parang A0, ganun kalaki, at susulat ang species at number of encounters at longhand. I-compute ngayon, saksak mo na lang yan sa Excel. So the question is, what is your excuse? So it's exciting times now. It's period of growth. Pero mga kapatid, ang last point ko dito is that the rate of discovery is being overturned or overcome by the rate of destruction. So yun yung status ng natin ngayon, mga kapatid. Nasa age of growth and empowerment. We have more conservation NGOs now, but our enemies are getting stronger. Yesterday, the moratorium on mining has just been lifted, and so, kumusta naman yan, mga besh? So yun. Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Aldrin. Ma'am Indira, similar sentiments?
Yeah, I think we are really in the early steps but developing quickly, as Aldrin has mentioned. No? Ang sa akin lang, kung balikan ko yung, I think among the speakers this morning, ako yung pinakamalayo yung degree sa university. Kasi I finished mass communication. Hala, ang layo. Yeah, I finished mass communication, but hindi mo alam na talagang hated ko yung zoology na class, and then I ended up working in conservation. So there was a time in the BCSP symposium that my zoology teacher in college approached me. Tapos hindi pa ata ako director, isang member board of director doon sa the BCSP at that time. But I was very active then. Tapos tinanong niya, bakit ka na dito? Anong ginagawa mo dito? And then I said, lagi ma'am, tingnan mo, marunong na ako ngayong humawak konti ng palaka, ganito. Tapos nung una, pag mag-microscope, hindi talaga ako marunong magpikit ng aking mga mata. Basta all these things, in my time, there was nothing about conservation biology. But what I see at the time being is that there is, I think, a bit of mismatch between the science and what is needed on the ground for conservation decision making. Parang, in my observation, many questions asked are still too academic, that it does not relate and help answer real life problems. No? So parang we are, wala lang, naka-enclose lang tayo na naka-confine lang tayo because we wanted to graduate and finish, but we do not understand the implications of it para talaga makatulong and conservation talaga. So, for example, yung if you talk about transparency, very recently nag-appear sa article sa Conservation Biology yung open science badges, yung recognition ng mga authors who engage in transparent practices, no? Pero wala talagang relation doon sa real problem. Sabi nga ni Aldrin, very well said, no, na while we are in leaps and heaps of discovery of new species, the amount of destruction is also Herculean. Talagang mahirap na mahirap. And the political scenario is even making it sometimes worse. No? Like, for example, he just said the mining ban has just been lifted and how this all affects, again, the newly discovered species, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am Sol, your comments on this?
Ayan, tapos, hindi, kumpara mo ngayon, dati kasi yung nag-field work kami, na pinipilit namin yung sarili na kasama kami sa field. Ngayon kasi madami ng funds eh. Kumbaga may sources na na makukuha, na yung may opportunities na madami yung mga estudyante. Ngayon, kumpara noon na wala talaga, pipilitin namin sarili namin na pumupunta ng bundok na sarili naming pera, wala kaming quarters, kami lahat nagbibitbit, libro, bigas, dilata, equipment, at traps, lahat. So, nasa backpack namin yun, hati-hati. So, walang funds talaga. So, wala yung opportunity na nabibigay ngayon kumpara noon. So, kung ako yung naging estudyante ngayon siguro ang saya-saya ko kasi ang dami-daming kukuha ka sa Nat Geo, meron ka sa Ruford Awards, sa lahat, meron locals na nagbibigay ng mga opportunities for studies, na field work. So, ibig ko lang sabihin ngayon sa mga estudyante na nakikinig, kung gusto niyo talaga, meron namang paraan. Kumbaga, nandyan lang sa tabi-tabi, in comparison nun sa amin na wala talaga, wala, napaka-minimal yung source ng funds. So, yun lang, para lang ma-encourage kayo na umakyat at gumawa ng inyong kanya-kanyang studies. So, meron kayong makukuha ang pera. Andyan si Dr. Halim, si Ms. Mundita, no? So, source of funds din yan. So, yun lang.
Thank you, Ma'am
So,
Sol.
ikaw ay source ng funds namin noon eh. Hinaharbatan ka namin ng sardinas para
Yes!
tayo. At nagpapatak-patak yung mga brothers and sis para masuporta ng fieldwork, di ba?
Hindi na lang
Oo,
hindi na siyang nanakawin kay Ma'am Sol ngayon.
naalala ko pa pala kasi nung nag-SA ako, student assistantship, para bumili ako ng pagkain ni na Aldrin at ni Arvin sa taas. Tapos ako din magbibit-bit, no, naaakit sa mga kiling. O, diba? Naalala ko tuloy.
Sure.
Thank you, Ma'am Sol. Speaking of Dr. Lim, your comments on the current status of conservation in our country.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. The same with the others. Iba na talaga yung situation ngayon. Ako, I started, as I mentioned earlier, na veterinarian ako. Pero at the time, until now actually, walang specialization ng wildlife. More small animals, livestock, ganun ang specialization. So I had to go out of the country to specialize on wildlife. Pero even then, yung knowledge ko hindi ma-match yung knowledge ng mga biologists. So I realized as a wildlife vet, I needed to work with wildlife biologists. Kaya ito sila Aldrin noon, mga well-respected na yan na mga wildlife biologist at the time, nung ako'y estudyante pa. So, sila yung mga kinoconsult ko. Ayan, sila Ompong, sila Aldrin, mga ano na yan, tinatanong ko na sila kung ano ba talaga yung behavior ng hayop na to, ano yung mga taxonomy, tinatanong ko sila para mas ma-direct ko yung treatment, kung ano ba talaga yung dapat gawin dun sa mga species na hinahandle ko. Yun, nakapagpaanak pa ako ng tama raw noon. So, yung mga decisions ko had to, I had to interact closely with the wildlife experts, yung mga biologists. And then, eventually, as a policymaker, I had to make decisions naman well, because of my background in science, gusto ko talaga ang mga decisions ko science-based din. Ang frustration ko lang nun, parang hindi nakaka-reach ng mabilis sa akin yung science before I have to make a decision or before I had to present my policy recommendation to higher management. So, swerte lang ako kasi may direct contact ako dyan, nakakasama ko sa Kalawit sila Aldrin, yung mga senior na at the time. So, yan, mga kabatch ni Carlo Custodio, yung kasama ko sa DENR noon. So anyway, so ngayon, mga nakaka-interact ko na sila, swerte lang na meron akong ganung link. Pero otherwise, yung mga tawag ko sa kanila, mga lifeline, yan, sila Leonard ko, mga lifeline ko. Pag may mga kailangan akong mga quick decision. Tapos si Perry Ong, the late Perry Ong was also a very good influence for me sa policy decision. Nag-organize siya ng isang meeting noon composed of yung mga lahat sa UP system para i-present kung ano yung mga available studies na pwede namin gamitin. Kasi it turns out na meron palang mga studies na available na pwede namin magamit sa policy na hindi nakakarating sa amin. So that was a very good realization na there are researches out there. Now we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to strengthen the linkage between the academe, the scientists, and the policymakers, so that we can make things happen and have a good basis for good to come out to issue the specific policies that would help us. So maganda yung linkage ko with yan sa mga senior wildlife biologist.
Gusto ko Ma'am Senior.
Thank you, Mundita, for laglaging us.
Senior talaga. Sir Rainier, your comments on the current status of conservation, at least in your field, sir.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay na, narinig niyo ba ako? Ayan. Sa amin kasi, medyo challenging yung species namin yung kinoconserve namin kasi crocodiles. So yung unang tinatanong kagad ng tao if you go in the field, yung common question nila ano ba yan? Pinusuportahan niyo pa yung buhao? Antayin niyo pa bang may mawalang buhay ng tao? Nasusuportahan niyo pa yung pagpaparami ng crocodile? So mahirap sagutin yun ng mga panahon. Kaya marami kaming kasama dati na nagpupursu ng crocodile conservation. Ngayon, about sa crocodiles sa Porosos, parang ako na lang ba yung senior doon na tumuloy? Parang gano'n. Pero we're developing yung mga iba pang mga younger generations. May mga kasama na ako dito mas bata. Mga bata ngayon, mga age nila is about 20s to 35. Merong ganyan. Tinuturuan na kasi yung orientation ng kanilang pag-approach sa conservation sa ngayon kumpara sa atin na tawag nila sa atin old school. Diba? Sa old school, yung manual natin, sabi nga ni Doc Aldrin yung card catalog, manual talaga natin yan. So sanay tayo doon na merong pressure natin. So yung mga bagong generations ngayon, although dumadagdag sila sa pool of conservation biologists, pero hindi sila masyadong, so yung tingin ko lang kasi in general, hindi sila masyadong nagde-deal directly on the pressure and practical implications doon sa kailangan nga ng society. Nga sagot sa problema, yun nga yung na nasagutin natin, sabi po ni Ma'am Indira, na kailangan meron tayong practical solutions doon out of the ecological studies na pinupuntahan yung ating mga gawain. Sa crocodiles, ang hirap sagutin ng mga tanong nila eh. Pero nung nasimulang nahanap ko yung sagot, bago lang, 5 years ago lang. Simula siguro yun nung ako'y may buhok at naubos, nawala, nalaglag. Bago lang din namin nalaman na ito yung pwedeng sagot. Pero yung sagot na yon, hindi pa masyadong ina-accept ng mga tao. Although we work out slowly and one step at a time, sana makakayanan natin sa mga panahon na to na ma overcome yung challenge. Ngayon pa na dumadami na po yung crocodiles sa wild. Marami na po kayong nakikita ngayon kasi laganap na rin yung ating social media, madali lang sila mag-post. Mas nahirapan kami doon. Mas nauuna po yung media, mas dumadami yung nagkakaroon ng interest sa media kumpara doon conservation bio na tag at na maaring tumulong sa atin. Well anyway, sa akin ang tingin ko yung status ng conservation natin dito sa Philippines. But we need to guide yung mga merong interest para mas ma-boost out natin yung kanilang specializations. Kailangan natin specializations eh. Medyo bawasan natin siguro yung generalist na approach kasi yung target natin eh lalong-lalo na on the habitat side. Kailangan i-direct yung ating approach na hirap na gawin at sabog yung ating resources, nangihirangan din tayo malaking finances pag nakakalat din yung ating sagot. Yun siguro, yun lang madadagdag na sa part na to.
Thank you Sir Rainier. Sige, dahil nabanggit nila kanina yung mga senior, no? So doon tayo sa youngest member ng ating ng panel. Ma'am Cynthia, your ideas on the current status of conservation in the country?
Ako, ang laking pasasalamat ko kila Sir Aldrin, kila Ate Sol, kasi nakinabang na ako, yung generation namin, dun sa mga ginawa nila. Yung mga publications nila hanggang ngayon binabasa ko pa rin, references pa rin. Pero ang siguro after a decade of working sa conservation, pansin ko pa rin na ang dami pa rin talaga nating kulang. Ang dami pa rin nating hindi alam tungkol sa mga species. So, number one, lumabas yan nung nagre-red list assessment kami na parang ang dami pa rin natin hindi alam ano yung distribution, ano yung threats, ano yung basic biology ng mga species. Partly dahil din yung mga konti lang yung gumagawa nito noon. Tapos second, hindi pa rin tayo, yung culture pa rin natin, hindi pa rin tayo ma-share. Ang daming researchers na sa ibang bansa, so nahihirapan tayong access. Yung dito naman, minsan sa NGO, so hindi rin publicly available. Tapos second, yun I would like to emphasize yung point na binigay ni Sir Rainier kanina, yung about specializations na kailangan talaga natin ngayon. Kasi sa ngayon, species pa rin yung focus natin, but at the same time, na mas siguro lalo na yung mga younger generations na nakatutok pa rin tayo about species discoveries. Pero for pagdating sa conservation, karamihan tumitigil na doon sa discovery. Dapat hindi tayo tumitigil sa discovery. Kailangan continuous pa rin yung dedication natin doon sa ginagawa natin. Ang work ng conservationist, tulad ng nangyari sa akin, pumapasok after no species discovery. At doon natin makikita ano yung mga kulang, ano yung mga kailangan gawin. So, tingin ko medyo detached pa rin karamihan sa atin kung ano talaga yung nangyayari sa field. So maganda makakuha na recognition, may mga bagong papers tayo. Pero yun nangyayari pagdating sa community, ang makaka-experience lang nito talaga yung mga bumababad sa field tulad nila Ma'am Indira na talaga nakikilala rin nila yung community. Kasi nagiging problema rin sa atin dahil kung mas napofocus lang tayo sa species or sa nature na nakakalimutan natin yung ibang aspeto, minsan nabiblame natin yung mga IPs, yung mga farmers, kasalanan nila yan. Whereas kung titingnan natin yung mas holistic approach to biodiversity conservation, mas malalaman natin ano ba historical perspectives. Bakit pa nagkaroon ng deforestation sa Pilipinas? Kasalanan ba yan ng IPs? Kasalanan ba ng farmers? And we would say na hindi. So, kung mas makikilala natin yung broader beyond species discoveries, mas marami pa tayong pwedeng makontribute sa biodiversity conservation.
Thank you, Ma'am Cynthia. Now, of course, when it comes to conservation biology and biodiversity conservation in general, so of course, before we work on it, or at least suggest some policies or even raise awareness, we need to gather data from different kinds of studies, such as ecological and diversity studies. But for my question, I'll go beyond ecological and diversity studies. So I would like to ask our panel of experts, so how do scientific studies in general or other such other data gathering methods or studies in general help contribute in the conservation efforts in our country, you know, from conservation groups to society? So how important is that link? Dr. Lim, your comments on this?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Actually, I already touched on that earlier when I said, there's really a need for science to link with policy decision making. Right now, ang daming mga kailangan pag-isipan, no? Especially with the post-pandemic recovery, maraming decision na kailangan gawin na para maka-catch up yung economic, yung progress, yung economic recovery. Sorry. Yon. So tingin ko it is now more than ever that we need the scientific information. Medyo nakita ko yung sinasabi ni Cynthia na minsan may kailangan kang data, kailangan ko nito, ano ba yung range ng ganitong species. So para alam namin kung ilang hektarya yung kailangan i-protect para hindi ito minahin, yung mga ganon. So importante yung mga ganong science to be able to make the decision, to assist the decision makers, no, to come up with the right formula, to come up with the balance. So yun yung tingin kong importance kung bakit medyo kailangan bilisan natin yung specialization, medyo bilisan natin yung pag-deliver at pag-link nung scientific information, nung conservation information para makahabol tayo dun sa mga kailangan desisyonan ngayon kasi yun nga nakikita ko yung kailangan kasi syempre hihirap yung mga tao eh. So meron silang mga gustong mga steps na gawin para mapunuan yon. We need to catch up on the recovery, but we don't want the biodiversity to be affected, no, to be impacted irreversibly in the process. Pero para makadesisyon, kailangan mo ng scientific information, and that has to be delivered in a timely manner.
Thank you, ma'am. So it comes to timely manner. Sir Aldrin, your comments on this?
Wow, pasensya na, medyo mahaba siguro yung sasagot ko dito. I suppose, I'm picking up from what Mandita said at saka si Cynthia, science to me should underpin decision making. We need to use the science to inform management. More than knowing the numbers, the species and number of species there are in, say, a landscape. But more than that, it's understanding the underlying factors that affect the species presence or absence, or indeed moving ahead. It's looking at the species occupancy. To me, it's understanding the species habitat, um, you know, species habitat association, and if we know which habitat the species are associated with, to know how much of these habitats are, how much of this habitat is being used by the species. So in other words, occupancy of that species, how much space would each species need? And then know how many of these, how many of these species are in and vis-a-vis yung space na kailangan nila. Only then we can, no, sorry, yung fourth group of information that we need is understanding and knowing the threats and identifying the threats that compromise the survival of this species. If we know all of those four points na yan, and again bringing science into the fore, when we count what counts and we identify the key conservation requirements of the species, dun tayo pupunta sa sinasabi ni Rainier at saka ni Cynthia na ang kulang, ang weak sa atin is science telling. We're not telling our story enough, or we're not telling our story more compelling enough to get decision makers to make those right decisions para hindi magtambak ng dolomite sa Manila Bay, or i-accept ang isang mining concession sa isang biodiversity rich at very vulnerable ecosystem. So mga ganong tipo. So I hope that long-winded answer, but I think that is the crux of the matter at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you po. Sir Rainier, how does again, sir, the question, how does scientific studies or ecological and at least diversity studies help you in your line of work right now?
Ayun, Eric. Dito kasi sa work na sabi ko nga very challenging kami, no. Hanggang ngayon sinasagot pa rin namin yung questions na ni-raise ko kanina. But yung human and crocodile tawag natin interaction, eh gusto namin i-convert yun as human crocodile coexistence. Pero mahirap gawin yung policies na yon. So, kahit na magpe-present tayo ng substantial data, yung crocodile is like this. Dalawa kasi yung klase ng crocodile natin eh. Very extreme yung kanilang behavior. Yung isa yung Philippine crocodile. Shy type, nasa terrestrial siyang level, tapos maliit lang siya. Yung isa namang crocodile natin ay yung saltwater crocodile, which is known to be aggressive at lumalaki. So magkalayo yung yung babanggitin mo na part ng behavior nila to the legislators. Papaintindi mo muna sa kanila, palagi kang mag-back to zero. Nang pagka naintindihan nila, ang question naman nila, paano kami mamumuhay? Doon tayo na si stalemate yung lahat ng ang gagawin na lang nila sa'yo, sige, sasagutin mo ito kung ano mangyari sa amin, sa communities namin. So, to provide tangible data doon sa mga policy para ma-accept nila yung level of acceptance lang. Hindi zero yung lahat ng policies, pero merong level of acceptance na para at least kahit pa paano may palabas na solutions at the end of the day. So yung mga ginagawa nating studies, dapat meron siyang kaakibat na mabibigay na pagkain doon sa sa communities. So, sa aming side, kasi we want to sustainable enough. Hindi natin, may barriers kasi yung conservations natin eh. Pag gutom yung mga tao, lalo na sa amin sa top predator ng aming species, pag gutom sila, kahit anong sabihin natin na conservation dyan, lahat ng mga inputs natin on science, eh wala, hindi papasok yun. Mas gusto na lang nila mag-illegal move, taas yung kanilang makukuha na income doon sa side na yon. Kesa naman pumasok sila on the legal side, eh konti naman ang nakukuha nila. Ang gusto natin gawin, maging acceptable sa kanila na like for sustainability, pwede nilang gamitin yung crocodiles for harvesting yung sa wild. Pero hindi natin pwedeng i-approach kaagad yun. Baka sabihin nila, kukunin na namin lahat yan kasolve ng conservation. So yung mga ganung policies yung wini-weigh natin, tapos magkaiba yung klase ng crocodile natin. Yung crocodile na saltwater crocodile, pag sinabi natin in general crocodile, harvestin din nila yung pati yung Philippine endemic natin na Philippine crocodile. So pareho tayo zero. Hindi tayo nagkakaroon ng win-win solution. So mahirap yung sa side namin sa species hanggang ngayon pinag-iisipan. But ang gusto lang gawin ngayon eh makita ng mga tao na yung crocodile ay pwede rin makapagbigay sa kanila ng economical or allowance para sa kanilang pamumuhay. Yun lang.
Thank you, Sir Rainier. Ma'am Cynthia, the importance of scientific studies and other data gathering measures to your line of work right now.
Paano ba natin to sasagutin? Kasi maganda na yung na-cover kanina ni Sir Aldrin sa kanin Dr. Lim. At maganda rin yung point ni Rainier. So siguro magbibigay ako ng example sa parehong national level sa local level. So yun nga, na-mention ko kanina na kulang pa rin talaga tayo sa data. Meron kasi tinatawag pagdating sa conservation management, merong dalawang klaseng approaches. Yung evidence-based conservation kung saan ilalatag mo lahat ng alam mo, tapos mamimili ka na doon among dito sa mga evidences na ito, mamimili ka ng best applicable dun sa scenario mo. Or yung tinatawag din na adaptive management. So tayo kulang pa tayo sa evidence sa Pilipinas. Ang tingin ko mas more on adaptive management pa rin tayo. So pag may lumitaw na issue, reaction, ito yung gagawin natin kasi ito yung issue ngayon. Tapos ganoon na naman, per issue ang dating natin. So kulang pa tayo sa evidence. Sa ibang bansa, actually may ginagawa na rin silang mga horizon scanning. So kina-foresee na nila yung mangyayari, yung tingin nila magiging issues at interesting topics of conservation in the next 1 to 5 years. So para mas maging handa sila. Thankful ako na ang BMB at ang ACB, by the time na nag-work na ako sa conservation, napaka-open nila sa mga NGOs at academies. So dahil doon, nagkaroon ng boses ngayon yung mga researchers at yung mga NGO workers pagdating sa policy development. So case in point siya yung in-assess, in-update natin yung DAO, National Red List of Threatened Terrestrial Species, na nakasama doon NGOs, academies, alongside sila Dr. Lim sa BMB para i-assess yung mga species. Pero doon lumalabas na kulang pa rin yung data na meron tayo para properly nating ma-assess. So dahil kulang yung information na meron tayo, it's either magre-rely na lang tayo sa kung anong alam natin, so baka maging bias yung ating assessment ng species. So dahil, or minsan, magiging data deficient na lang sila kasi hindi natin alam. So yung conservation actions na pwede sana natin i-afford sa mga species, kulang din dahil lang sa kulang sa kaalaman natin. At the same time, yung pagdating naman sa community, actually, ang responsive ng mga communities pagdating sa research, interested sila malaman kung anong ginagawa mo, kung bakit ka nagpupunta doon nagsusurvey. So, gusto rin nilang naririnig yun at mas naiintindihan nila. Ang nakukulangan lang tayo kapag masyado tayo nag-focus sa sciences na alam natin, pagpipilitan natin minsan kung ano yung sabi ng science. Na tama yung sinabi kanina ni Sir Rainier, na minsan kapag hindi na natin na-translate sa immediate needs ng community, mas lalo silang lumalayo. So in that sense, may evidence nga tayo, pero kailangan din nating matuto kung paano siya i-fit dun sa pangangailangan ng community. Kung may conservation program nga tayo, gutom naman yung community. So hindi nila ma-appreciate yung ginagawa natin. Kahit sabihin natin endemic yung species na yan. Pero nangyari sa amin dati sa Calayan Vale, so kahit sabihin namin sa community na wala yan sa ibang isla, dito lang yan sa Pilipinas. Pero tapos sinabi namin sa kanila na maganda magtayo tayo ng wildlife sanctuary. So para sa kanilang initial reaction nila, kukunin nyo ba yung lupa namin? Nung nalaman nila na hindi namin kukunin yung lupa ninyo. And more importantly, yung wildlife sanctuary ay hindi lang para sa Calayan Vale, pero para rin sa watershed, nagbibigay ng tubig sa kanilang farmlands, mas naging supportive sila dun sa project. So nagamit pa rin both yung evidence, yung science, yung product ng research, but at the same time, tailor fit din kung ano yung kinakatakutan ng mga community, which is yung basic needs nila, pagkain, shelter. Nagana din naman tayong lahat, hindi naman yung basic needs natin. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Cynthia. Ma'am Indira, your comments on this?
Ano pa bang sasabihin ko na nasabi na nila lahat? Anyway, so I think we all agree na lahat ng mga ecological studies, diversity studies, whatever it is, talagang intended na may impact ka to conservation sana, and it influences conservation decision making and conservation planning. So pero I'll make an example na lang. For example, we know from our studies that the Philippine cockatoo, ang katala, ay isang lowland forest specialist. Kasi yung mga nest trees niya ay between 0 to 150 meters above sea level lang. So these are really lowland forests, no? At kung saan yung lowland forest, doon din yung destruction, ang vulnerability ay mataas din masyado kasi accessible. Talagang lahat pwede. Lahat ng mga developments na gusto ng government ay doon din nangyayari. At ang sabi ni Aldrin nga, ang lowland forest even harbor more diverse species of biodiversity in comparison to other montane forest, for example. So talagang napakalaki talaga ng challenge. And I add to Dr. Ardrin's point also na yung habitat ay important. Ang pinaka-importante din na nakita namin, especially na ang katala ay lowland forest specialist, ay yung pag-capacitate ng ating local partners. From the very start, kahit pa science-based or evidence-based or research yung ginagawa nyo, importante na para sa amin na involved na sila. So they are already start understanding what you really are.
Naputol po ata si Ma'am Indira. Brown out po kasi sa kanila. Ma'am, let's go back to Ma'am Indira later. Ma'am Sol, your ideas on this?
Lang ha. Nasabi na rin nila lahat, pero i-contribute ko itong working with private corporations, no? It's maganda tong sinabi mo yung studies na nagko-contribute ng biodiversity studies and ecological studies contributes to the decision making of hindi lang sa country, hindi lang sa kahit sa sa private corporations, because katulad ng when a private corporation is working with academe, NGOs like CCI, like Herpwatch Pilipinas, Philippine Eagle Foundation, or and the UP Diliman. Kasi ako nasa geothermal corporation ako nagtatrabaho. So what we do is link with these institutions para we have this good decision making on how further to uh, ano prevent or yung mga decisions na educated, well, mga decisions na dapat anuhin sa company. So we have binhi projects which we are having this 96 species of threatened and premium trees na we are actually reviving kasi mga critically endangered species na hinahanap namin sa buong Pilipinas para lang mapadami sila to lower down the threat status nila. So we also have this biodiversity conservation and monitoring program which we have sa lahat ng sites namin sa Pilipinas. So and in Mount Apo, we also have this Philippine Eagle Conservation Program, which na-discover lang namin lately that we have a family of Philippine Eagle within our area of responsibility. So, yun yung mga tipong mga decisions na science-based decisions ng company para lang ma-promote ang biodiversity conservation, hindi lang sa aming sites kundi sa ibang partners din kasi we partnered with other academies para dun sa mga arboretums, mga ganon. Yun lang yung sana ang wish ko lang din na other private companies would do this kasi it would help restore the forest of our country. Kumbaga, 'di ba? Masyado akong emotional. Lang.
Ma'am Sol. So of course, this data coming from scientific studies, no? Doon naman tayo magpunta sa practical side of things, no? So I would like to ask, at least with the current work of our panel of experts, I would like to ask, or if it's possible that you share with us, any sampling or monitoring methods that you currently employ in your line of work, no, that are really important in the conservation of biodiversity in the country. Whether may it be scientific or whether it may be social data gathering. So what are those specific sampling and monitoring methods that you use in your current line of work? Sir Rainier, would you kindly share what you are doing in the field right now?
Uy, yun ako pala mauna. Sige. Sige, nag-prepare ako ng konting slides kasi para mas may visual sila. Okay lang ba yung screen?
Sige sir, you may share your screen po.
Mabilis lang naman. Yan na. Sa crocodile surveys, yung ginagawa namin kasi, magkaiba nga yung dalawang klase ng crocodiles, although this, considered siya as critically endangered dito sa buong Pilipinas. Crocodile natin, pero yung isang saltwater crocodile natin is a least concern. So dito tayo mag-focus sa Indo-Pacific crocodile. So yung status niya ngayon is about 8,000 individuals in the wild, but yung Philippine crocodile natin is about 92 to 137. So stable yung population ngayon ng Indo-Pacific, and then somehow recovering siya, yung Philippine crocodile. So ito yung mga ginagamit namin. So river transit cruise yung meron kaming pang umaga at saka pang gabi. So sa umaga, key informant interview, meron kaming basking, yung visual encounter, tapos next occurrence. Tapos naghahanap pa kami ng ibang mga evidence na nandun yung crocodile kasi very, cryptic yung paghanap. Saka nakasiksik talaga siya sa mga lugar na hindi natin nakakayang marating. So paggabi, medyo nakakatakot yung pag-survey, pero kailangan lang ng konting training. So spot counting yung ginagawa natin, pwede rin tayo gumagawa ng size class estimation, saka yung data recording. So magkakasunod siya within a segment of a river transit cruise. So yung mga preparations natin ng mga gamit, hindi naman siya kailangan ng mga komplikadong gamit. So, kailangan ng long life vest para kung ano lang, tumawag yung bangka, hindi, walang tatawag yung bangka. Ano lang, para sa tubig lang, pag opens naman. May field notes, tapos isang spotlight, tapos meron kang GPS ngayon, binoculars kung gusto natin makita siya ng mas malayo, at makita natin na meron crocodile, at nilalapitan natin siya. Tapos may mga lubid tayo in preparation kung gusto natin siyang hulihin. So sa day survey, ang ginagawa natin, kumukuha muna tayo ng data, communities kasi sila yung palaging nandoon. Mas alam nila yung mga lugar and then papasok tayo doon sa kung saan meron mga crocodiles. So makikita natin ang mga crocodiles palagi sa mga ganitong area, yung midstream, gitna siya, dumalangoy siya patagos doon sa kabilang bank, pero hindi siya nag-stay sa gitna. Pupunta siya sa on bank, sa gilid lang siya, gilid ng tubig para mabilis din siyang bumaba. Meron din siya sa shallow water on edge kung walang bank, river bank. Or nasa mud siya, nakasiksik. Ito yung uso niya, ito yung mga delikadong part naman sa mga communities natin. Marami tayong nag-discratch sa mga ganitong klase. Nakabaon yung crocodiles, nag-hibernate sila. Or sa vegetation, sa mga groups na yun, nakatago lang din sila para basking nila. Bihira yung nakaganito sa vegetation and in water. Mostly, sila, nasa tabi sa on bank. Nangingitlog sila malayo sa tubig, malayo sa riverbank. Nung nagsisimula ang itlogan nila 50 meters from the river edge hanggang doon sa dulo ng ng ilog. Minsan nakakaabot pa siya sa mga palayan. So gumagawa sila ng nest mound. Yung nest mound din masyadong malaki yan. So visible na visible tapos clear din yung gilid. So merong about 20 to 50 meters from the riverbank. Yung iba naman nandun sa marshy landward hanggang 500 meters. So malayo. Hindi mo in-expect na may crocodile doon sa lugar na yan. Basta inaabot ng tubig, ng tidal fluctuation. Or more than 500. Sa mga ferns, tapos may mga nyug. Basta merong riverine areas. Meron ka makikitang nest. So, important evidence, tinitingnan namin kung wala kami makitang crocodile, wala kami makitang nest. Maghahanap kami ng mga basking site nila, mga basking area na malapit sa tubig. So, makintab siya, malinis, may mga digits, mga print ng paa nila na nandoon. Kasi talagang babalik at babalikan nila kung sino yung nandyan na crocodile, yan at babalik sa lugar na yan, ginagawa niya. Or, belly drag sa mud. Napuntahan namin. So, yung digits naman, nakabaon. Makikilala mo ang crocodile sa mga monitor lizard kasi yung crocodiles baon lahat, nakabaon ang nakaprint hanggang dito sa heel niya. Ito yung mga claw. Sa monitor lizard hindi. Medyo mababaw lang. Or nandoon sa may gilid ng tubig kasi nilabas lang nila yung ulo nila. Ngayon, marami na tayong gamit. Pwede na tayong gumamit ng drone. So may pwede na tayong makita. Di ba? Na mga nagsusurvey ngayon, mas madali na. Drone na lang ginagamit. So, before we start yung survey, nag-orientation lahat ng buong team. Kahit na palagi na kaming nagsusurvey, may isang orientation. Ito yung ginagamit namin. Avoid loud noises, sabihin mo lang, huwag ka na munang ingay. Pag nag-start na tayo, stay calm, keep focus, and important, panic. Yun lang naman siya. Tapos, tinitingnan namin yung moon phase para mas madilim, mas maganda. Kasi hindi tayo nakikita ng crocodile at mas madali natin makita yung crocodile dun sa kanyang tapetal reflection. So, pwedeng umakyat lang kami basta one spotting service lang papunta or pababa. Pipili ka kung upstream ka ba o downstream yung survey, ang pagbilang mo. Hindi pwedeng double count. Yan, tatlo lang ang minimum na sakay. Meron kang spotter sa unahan, tapos may recorder and yung navigator sa dulo. Pwedeng nag-share kayo ng data ng second spotter mo, pero ang main recorder ay yung main spotter mo yung talagang nasa unahan kasi siya yung mas nakakita ng umiilaw. Ano bang hinahanap natin dyan? Ina-expect ba natin na makikita yung crocodile na ganito ang ulo? Pero in reality, that lang siya na pula. na makikita. Parang baga ng sigarilyo. So, kailangan nating lapitan yung crocodiles. Hanggang palapit ng palapit. At pag malapit na, i-estimate natin yung size ng crocodiles. Tapos, paano ba mag-estimate ng size? Madali lang po mag-estimate ng size ng crocodile. Tuturuan ko lang kayo saglit. Yan yung size ng crocodile based on the length ng head. So, pag nakita nyo yung length ng head ng crocodile, kasi paggabi, ganyan talaga lumalabas sa kanya. So, locate nyo lang yung mata, tapos yung dulo ng nguso niya. Ito, usual na nakalabas. So, estimate nyo siya by inches. Tapos, kung nakakuha kayo ng 7 inches, yun na yung na-convert nyo lang siya sa feet. Yung crocodile niya is 7 feet long. Yan lang. So, yung kalahati ng crocodile, buntot, kalahati naman yung body. Pagka medyo bumaba mas mahaba sa 10 feet, i-consider nyo na siya kagad as male. Kasi bihira yung female na mas mahaba sa 10 feet. And then, we record yung ating mga nakuha, depende doon sa size category, sa size class, at saka yung position niya sa river. At siyempre, may mga basic na tayo na data, yung starting and finishing point, tapos yung date, and sino yung recorder. Dilatag na natin ngayon yan sa mapa natin based on the computations. Tapos, since hindi naman natin nakukuha lahat, hindi natin na-expect na makita yung mga crocodile, ginagamitan siya natin ng correction factor based doon sa isang standard method. At depende sa size class nila. Yan. So, para patuloy na mahanap natin mga crocodile, hindi lang natin ngayon sa isang lugar lang. So, naghahanap kami ng katulong. Nandyan palagi yung ating mga law enforcers na PNP Maritime. Sa kanila, sila palagi nasa dagat at nasa tubig. Coast Guard at ang mga LGUs natin, Philippine Navy, Bureau of Fire kasi meron silang rescue group. Of course, sa Palawan, PCSD, and sa other parts of the Philippines yung DNR. So, kasama na po natin sila. Meron tayong program on PROCON, PH, and Nationwide Population Survey. So, nakagawa tayo ng mas maraming lugar na. May mga lugar po tayo kasi na mayroong human crocodile coexistence na nangyari. Yung crocodiles yun, mga indigenous people, ang tingin nila po sa crocodiles ay relatives nila. So, yung mga indigenous people doon sa mga Manobo, ang wetlands po nila, meron po silang cultural expressions doon na mga banggit, mga rituals sila, yung mga attachment nila doon sa lugar na yon. Yung mga areas po na merong mga magaganda yung wetlands doon at meron sinasabi po yun po kanilang fish sanctuary. Merong health populations na nangyari. Kaya ayaw nilang patanggal yung crocodiles nila doon. Na may isang LGU na kumuha nung malaking crocodile si Lolong na hindi dapat sana siyang kinuha. Kaya malungkot yung mga tao, mga IPs natin, mga kapatid natin. Ito ayoko sana ipakita pero this is the reality. Ang 2000 since 2000 hanggang 2020, ito lang po yung saka 42 na total. Mahaba na pong panahon yan for the 20 years. Yung sa Indonesia, baka ano lang ito, 1 month lang ito. 400 attacks, total incidents within a year. So, maliit lang po yung contribution ng Pilipinas na sana ito ay maging positive. Gawin natin siyang coexistence. So, ginawa namin literally, nangampanya po kami as in literal na kampanya. Kalendaryo, baliktad nga po nilagay namin sa labas, hindi sa loob ng bahay. Yung kaligtasan, mga reminder sa buhay. So kasama natin po dyan yung mga law enforcers natin. Natutuwa naman sila na naitap natin sila at katanungan sa mga communities. So, hindi po sagot na kunin natin yung crocodile sa wild palagi ito yung meron yung na-report. So, ang crocodiles po ang nagbibigay ng kanyang laki sa wild. Halimbawa, meron tayong 11 crocodiles, 10 kilometers stretch ng river. Kinuha natin kasi nakita nung isa, ni-report niya yung crocodile na malaki dito. So, kinuha natin yan, in-extract natin sa wild. Ang mangyayari po dyan, magdi-distribute ngayon sila. So, magkakaroon sila ng spaces. So, pag may space na, pwede na pong yung crocodile na meron. Yung na-solve natin. Nagkaroon pa ulit tayo ng 2 crocodiles na. Habang kinukuha natin siya ng mga crocodile, lumalaki po yung other crocodiles in the area. So, kaya nakikita natin, sabi natin, tuloy-tuloy pa rin tayong nag-extract ng crocodiles. Hindi po natin kayang ubusin lahat. Kaya naghahanap tayo ng solusyon para magkaroon ng sustainability or ng protection yung mga tao at saka yung crocodiles at to have a win-win solution. Kaya lang, meron po tayong ganito. Habitat destruction and conversion. Usually, yung mga tao lumalapit po talaga sa tubig, access ng basic needs. So, na-encourage yung crocodiles and nadadrive po sila palabas. And sa pag-drive na yon, meron na tayong nangyayaring ganito, changing landscape na magkaiba. Isang ilog lang yan, pero yung isang kabilang side, may protection yung barangay, nag-protected local protection nila. Pero yung kabilang barangay, kabilang side ng ilog, bungi pa rin. So, mayroon parang kumaga may leak. May leak yung ating conservation. So, kailangan nating i-balance yun sila. Kasi yung crocodile, ituhan din po siya ng climate, ng temperature. So, magkakaroon ng climate change, magkakaroon po ng shift ng dami ng species. Kung init po yung crocodiles ay na-determine yung sex niya depende sa temperature. Yung gender niya depende sa temperature. Kung mainit ang panahon, lamang po ang lalaki maglalabas. Kung malamig naman yung panahon, below 28, below 29, more of females naman. So magkakaroon ng single sex ang lugar. So kung merong mataas ang temperature, mas marami ang lalabas, magiging mas malalaki ang buhay natin, which is magkakaroon tayo ng magiging problema doon sa human and crocodile incident natin. Pag malaking crocodile mo, mas malapit siyang maghanap ng tao. So, nagkanda kami ng mga studies din po. Tinignan namin kung nasaan ba yung mga towel areas pa ng Crocodylus porosus na pwede pa natin puntahan. Na meron namang protection. Or konti na lang po siya ang merong may protection. So, to increase the area with protection under the protected area. Pinakamalaki po ngayon is Palawan and Bohol and some of Agusan. Yun po yung mga area. Meron din po tayong mga part ng Tawi-Tawi at ng Zamboanga. Ang latest study po namin ngayon, ginagawa yung DNA. So, kung meron kaming mga crocodiles na nakuha from the wild or from the captive na known distribution, pinukuha namin yung tissue sample and ito po yung initial na lumabas. Meron po tayo yung mga crocodiles from Palawan, meron pong interaction sa Tawi-Tawi. So, meaning nakaka-access sila, nakapunta sila dito sa Tawi-Tawi. And yung Tawi-Tawi, meron pong interaction with some part of Mindanao group. Pero ano pong nangyari dito? Ito pong nahuling mga crocodiles, yung malaki dito sa Simonol and Tawi-Tawi, nag-cluster sa na iba. At yung sa dulo po ng Palawan, may cluster din po siya na isa. Kaya lang isa pa rin sample, may papadagdag pa lang. Meron na po tayong, suspect po namin dito, meron tayong migration from the other parts of Borneo, which is mas malaki yung population nila. Maabot po sila ng 13 to 15,000 crocodiles dito lang sa tip of Borneo, sa may Sabah. So nagkakaroon na ng migration from Borneo papunta sa Pilipinas, sa maakyat na po. So, kami po ngayon dito, ng interest sa crocodile study or specialization, we provide funds, research funds for about 50,000 per study. Apply nyo. Anything about crocodile. Kahit na po, social, basta meron pong ililink with crocodile habitat or posters, anything po na may connection na sa crocodile. Ayun po. And Sir Eric, to you. Thank you po.
Thank you, sir. I think Ma'am Indira is already back. Ma'am Indira, would you would like to share us any sampling or monitoring methods that you use in your line of work in conservation?
Hi, sorry brown out kasi. Kaya I don't know until when my battery would be able to do this, and also the connections. Do you see my slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so an example is nest monitoring, for example. So lahat ng mga nest ng cockatoo ay talagang binibisita namin, and that includes checking their progress, their growth from egg to hatchlings and then to fledglings, no? And hindi lang po ganon, kundi meron ding yung pag-rescue. Halimbawa, ang mga observations namin pag extreme dry season, talagang dehydrated at starved yung birds, kaya dapat i-rescue sila either in situ, meaning every 4 hours i-climb siya ng mga wildlife wardens natin, na mga indigenous peoples din, na former poachers na ngayon ay mga wildlife wardens na deputized by the DNR. So talagang capacitated sila kung ano yung gagawin, kasi alam din nila yun, kasi yun ang trabaho nila before, no? Otherwise, kung hindi talaga makaya for rescue doon sa site, ay dinadala namin ito sa center para for proper management and treatment, and then i-release back into the wild. Tapos yung nest characterization din, importante din yun, kasi hindi mo na kailangang ano sa Tagalog? Halugulin, whatever. You have to search the whole forest para lang maghanap ng nest trees, no? Kasi alam mo na yung nest preference ng katala, kasi meron kang parameters collected from the number of nest trees na nakuha mo. Tapos lahat ng pinaka-preference orientation ng nest hole sa east, sa west, gano'n. Tapos weather, saan yung pangalan nito, temperature requirements sa loob, kasi nilalagyan din natin ng data loggers. Tapos alam mo rin kung ano yung indications kung ang isang nest tree ba ay occupied, so something like this. Tapos we do also banding, so we can monitor the fledglings every year, no? So meron yung DNR na tatak, tapos ang number of a year. So matitrace mo rin individually kung makita mo sila sa through the scopes kung from which nest trees sila nanggagaling. And then we do all the biometrics sa bird para talaga makita natin. So with these studies, nakita natin nga na talagang lowland forest specialist ang isang katala, no? So that the nest trees are just between not only feeding ground of the Philippine cockatoo, but also the breeding ground of the Philippine cockatoo. Pero isang species lang ng mangrove ang ginagamit niya ngayon as a breeding nest tree, no? Ito lang ang Soneracia alba o ang pagatpat. So importante din yung pagkuha mo sa pagatpat, pag-protect mo sa mangroves, not only for the benefits and the ecosystem function it gives you, it provides, but it also benefits pala. It is also important breeding aid for the cockatoo. So, dahil sa mga studies niyan, ilang years old, ilang days old na sila. For samples to kasi lang kung adults na sila, so lalaki naman ay itim. I still heard?
Yes,
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So yun po. So dapat malaman namin para kung yung year na yun ay mas marami bang babae, kasi puro tayo conserve, pero yun naman para maraming lalaki kaysa babae, so ang breeding hindi naman successful. And then also for PBFD testing. Yung PBFD, yung Cetacean Beak and Feather Disease, na kung saan malalaman natin itong virus na very fatal for the cockatoos, na sana ay wala sila in the wild. So for the past naman, wala naman yung negative naman lahat yung ating. Merong mga false positives na warn din kami, and then we inform the local authorities, lalo na sa mga nagko-collect din kami sa parrots. These are only for parrots, no? Nagko-collect din kami sa parrots na sold in the market, yung pet, mga bungies, at saka mga lovebirds, and most of them have PDFD. So, importante talagang malaman yun kasi for policies to be made na anong gagawin natin to stop and to address that issue. So, isa rin sa importante yung citizen science, no? Kasi nga hindi nasa site din, no? Importante nga talaga sa amin yung local participants. Maiiwan, natitrain mo para makita nila talaga kung ano yung ginagawa mo at malihan nila lalo. So, kung makikita nila na yung katala na take care until fledgling, makikita din nila sa roosting site kasi the cost, hindi sila nag-roast na pa isa-isa, dalawa-dalawa, kundi talagang influx nila ito. And another form of the roost counts. Ito talaga, yun ang sasabihin ko kanina sa tol na we've done so ay talagang we should also try to towards regular biodiversity monitoring scheme, the roost sites of the Philippine cockatoo, and then we can start
connect po na-disconnect po si Ma'am Indira, brown out po kasi sa kanila. Sayang naman. But Ma'am Mundita, what about ACB po? What are the sampling and monitoring methods that the organization is employing, whether scientific or social data?
No, we actually don't do the research ourselves, but we engage researchers to do the studies. Like yung mga ginagawa ni Rainier, those are the outcome of those studies would be important for us. So we leave it up to the field scientists to employ the appropriate tools and survey methods so that we can, the outcome would be more important for us eventually. Of course, it helps that because we are working in the ASEAN, that there would be some standard methodologies that can be adopted so that the data can be, interpreted in such a way that we can make a regional analysis of the information that is generated from the research. So I won't deal because we're dealing with a lot of species.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am Sol, what does the EDC usually do in your in the area that you are responsible of when it comes to sampling and monitoring?
Madami kasi for the flora we do the binhi, so we survey all parts of the Philippines where these threatened premium species of trees are located or known as distributed. So kung makikita namin sila, we take samples, we get seeds and reproduce them. Tapos pinapadami namin sila sa aming vegetative material recovery nursery. Tapos yung sa hanggang dumami na sila, no? Tapos sa BCMP naman, we employ 3 modules of it for the flora, fauna, and freshwater modules. We have for the BCMP, for the flora modules, we do the permanent forest dynamics plot, which is we engage the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and CMU, Central Mindanao University, for our permanent plot here in Mount Apo. And we also engage with Philippine Eagle Foundation for the Philippine Eagle Conservation Program. And ay, na-miss ko yung sa BCMP pala, we have this also the fauna, which we are regularly monitoring our birds and bats within our sites. Tapos we do bird transects, we do point counts, point transect. Tapos we also do mixed netting, and for birds we all for bats we also do mixed netting and tagging and release method. For the freshwater module, we also engage the UP Diliman also. We have this module for the freshwater visual MBSAP. Hanapin ko nga yung ano. Anyway, MBSAP na kung kinukuha namin yung invertebrate macroinvertebrate species sa freshwater rivers and streams namin to we are studying the EPP families, Penoptera, Plecoptera, and something that hindi ako masyado sa insects. So anyway, tapos yung sa Philippine Eagle Foundation naman, we do monitoring ng birds. So basically ang ginagawa namin, magsa-standby ka lang dun sa area. Tapos hahanapin mo yung kung merong nagsusor. Tapos last November, i-share ko lang yung photos ng Philippine Eagle. Pwede akong mag-share ng screen.
Sige ma'am, do share po.
Okay. Sige, teka lang ha. Ito. Yan, wait lang ha. Ito yung isa sa mga yung Philippine Eagle na na-observe namin last November within our area of responsibility. So, nakita namin siya along sa in-between Kidapawan and Magpet area. Yes, one. I'm soaring. So, kung ito nakita mo yung cursor ko, ito yung Philippine Eagle na una namin nakita. Tapos, still flying. Tapos, meron kaming na-observe na nagtatry siya. Ito yung kasing 2-year-old na 2-year-old na nakita namin na Philippine Eagle. So, una namin siyang nakita kesa dun sa yung parents niya. So, ito yung 2 eagle. Nagtatry pa siya na actually mag-hunt ng makak. Pero failure yung una niyang hunt. So, yan. Napaka-majestic niya kung hindi mo alam yung pag una mo siyang makita, ang reaction mo is kung titingin ka sa binoculars o kukunan mo ng picture. Alam mo yun, o videos ba? Ito siya, napakaganda ng yung pattern ng kanyang ng feathers. Kita pa ba? Ito siya, nakatalikod. Malabo na yung pictures ko. Ayan, yun lang. So kung yun lang po yung pwede kong ma-share. Kasi hindi ako prepared.
Thank you, ma'am. Tourist po. Ma'am, Tia, sampling and monitoring methods that you usually use when it comes to data in conservation?
Sige, ayan. Nagkarami ako ng slides. Nahiya ako sa kanila. Mag-share din ako ng screen. Hindi pa na pressure.
Pressure.
Ginalingan kasi nila. So ito. So yung una i-share ko muna ginagawa namin for the Calayan Rail. So na-mention ko kanina, endemic siya sa isang isla sa Babuyan Island. So Babuyan Island sa far north of the Philippines. So sa maliit na isla yan, doon na makikita itong ibon na to. Na-discover nila Ate Sol in 2004. It's very remote. So yung Calayan Rail, itong ibon na to, na nasa taas, yung may pulang beak, ayan, napaka-cute niya. But at the same time, napaka-diverse din ng biodiversity sa Babuyan Group of Islands. So what we do, we organize yung, merong, galing ko lang to. Ayan. So meron kaming in-establish na project, called the Calayan Rail Project. So nagsimula siya noong 2005 upon discovery of the Calayan Rail. Tapos from 2009, ang ginawa namin ay we trained yung local communities and volunteers para sila na mismo yung mag-survey at mag-conserve the sarili nilang endemic species. So eventually, nagkaroon na rin kami na established protocols, naging island-wide na rin yung survey. Dinadagdagan namin based sa studies na nag-a-appear every year. So tatlong tao sa isang team, ang pinaka-technique na ginagamit namin yung playback method, yung hawak na nasa gitna. Tapos may dalawang extra observer. Tapos at the end of the 7-minute call, ng playback call, nire-record yung observation kung nakita, narinig, or both. At kung ano yung call, type of call, kung gaano katagal yung call, at kung gaano dumapit dun sa mga observers. So, based from itong mga studies, so nakakuha kami ng real count from 2005 and ongoing. So we're very fortunate na kahit last year, dahil nga community-based yung ginawa naming research study, so kahit pandemic at hindi makatawid yung team from Metro Manila or from mainland Luzon, at least kayang gumalaw ng team on the ground. So yung highest count na nakuha namin is 403, but we suspect na mataas itong year ng 2018 dahil yung survey nito nag-extend till August and September kung saan yung mga juveniles from the previous breeding season ay nagre-respond na rin. So, kinumpare lang namin yung weight ng ostrich. So, sa isang ostrich, meron kang 568 feeding, so kulang pa rin ang feeding. Hindi pa kaya bumuo ng isang ostrich. And apart from yung doing yung annual census na nagiging major part na rin ng project, so we also use species distribution modeling. We also use mapping software to compute for yung area of occurrence and extent of occurrence at kung nasaan na nakikita-detect yung mga species. So dito na sinabi namin sa isang presentation namin na ang extent of occurrence ng Calayan Rail at ang kanyang area of occurrence ay katumbas ng 2 Pasig cities. And apart from yung doing yung annual census, we also conduct interviews with the local communities. Ito are especially targeted para sa mga hunters para malaman namin kung significant threat ba ang hunting sa Calayan Rail. And we found out na oo. Isa sa mga top 10 species commonly hunted ang Calayan Rail and using snares. So nalaman din namin through yung mga interviews ito with local community kung anong age sila natututo mag-hunt, kung ano yung reason nila for hunting, at kung dumadami ba based sa mga hunters yung bilang ng Calayan Rail in the wild or not. And then we also use satellite data. So we combine yung mga information on the ground to do, apart from species distribution modeling, also remote sensing para makita din na, ma-analyze din namin kung may threat ang habitat loss. So based dito sa study na to, so lumalabas na oo, kasi kumukonti rin yung forest cover sa isla. And then, so, from Calayan Rail, I'd like to jump in sa isa pang study na ginawa namin noon on invasive alien species. So yung mga students na dito, if you're looking for a research topic, napakagandang topic ng invasive alien species kasi konti pa lang ang gumagawa nito. This is part of the Forest Project at may utang pa akong publication kay Dr. Lin. So ang ginawa namin dito, we surveyed protected areas in the Philippines. Tinignan namin kung ano yung kung nakapasok na at kung nakapasok na ay kung saan makikita ang mga invasive species sa within protected areas. So alam naman natin yung importance sa protected areas. So dapat pristine sila. So para yung ecosystem services na mabibigay sa atin na ay ma-maintain pa rin natin. So shout out dito kay Danny Balete who helped us develop itong methods. So we surveyed outside protected areas sa buffer zones and also within yung core ng protected area mismo. So combination of contact line, trapping, opportunistic sampling, also observation points. So mula doon sa results na yun, makikita natin na karamihan, even ito sa plants, pero same goes with animals, vertebrate animals at least, na karamihan talaga sa kanila, disturbed areas and also sa river. Pero meron mga paunti-unti na nakakapasok within protected areas. So ang implication to sa management, so dapat meron ka na mga species na nilo-look out for kung gusto mo talagang i-manage yung invasive alien species within protected areas, and also to keep yung integrity ng protected areas intact. And then sa part ng Biodiversity Conservation Society of the Philippines naman, so we help the national government update the national red list. So na-mention ko nga kanina, marami pang kulang na information ng mga biology and ecology. So what we're doing now, in relation pa rin dito sa kaka-update natin na red list, so we've also published yung ginawa naming process sa pag-update ng red list, so you can access that online. So right now, we're doing yung priority setting din. We're creating a database ng mga kung ano na alam natin about sa mga species, kung ano na yung mga research na gawa na ng conservation na gagawa. So at least makapag-recommend tayo sa mga students, sa teachers, and even sa government ng mga priority conservation actions na dapat ibibigay dun sa mga threatened species. And then I'd also like to add yung significance ng education pagdating sa biodiversity conservation. So right now, walang survey involved, pero yung mga information na alam na natin, we are making a toolkit for teachers para ma-integrate ito sa school curriculum ng mga grade school to senior high school students. So meron dyan introduction to biodiversity, intro to Philippine biodiversity, and then may mga threats and conservation actions. And we use a lot of examples from the Philippines para talaga maintindihan ng mga communities, ng mga teachers and students sa Pilipinas. So, ang dami namin nagamit na research publications from itong mga panelists natin ngayon kasi sila yung nakakaalam na nangyayari on the ground. So, we incorporated that dito sa toolkit para mas lalo makilala ng mga students. So magkakaroon within the toolkit, magkakaroon ng species fact sheets para alam din natin kung ano yung pwede pang gawin ng mga students on the ground. So we're launching this next month, very soon. So ayan, abangan nyo yan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Cynthia. So tingnan natin kung na-pressure din si Sir Aldrin, your the sampling methods and monitoring methods that you employ, sir.
Sige, salamat. Na-pressure ako. Pakita lang ako ng sample. Na-cover naman na ni mga kasama. I suppose my point here to add is that it's not wrong, or it's hindi naman masama na we do species specific work, because those are fundamental and yun ang building blocks, but importante dito, as we move higher and patas yung degree of intensity at complexity nung data and information, sana ang point ko lang ay mag-elevate ito into informing decision making. At just to stress the point that yung socioeconomic information or socioeconomic analysis is science too. Magkaiba lang siguro yung physical science at saka socio-economic science. But we do consider yung focus group discussions, hunters interviews, yan science din yan. Anyways, just to say that my work as from academia and NGO, tumatawid, nagmamakasan dalawang ilog. It's more about making sense of the data. And this is an example of the data that we've collected 20 years ago. Ang tawag dito, the seminal work that we've done on analysis of threatened birds. And this shows point localities, historical and recent. No? And this is the way we've done things in the last 20 or so odd years. But the problem is a lot of these areas are unexplored. And we've written a paper on that. But just suffice it to say, in nature, problema natin is incomplete detection. They occur in the place, but the usual problem is that you will not encounter them because there are many factors that will hamper your detection, or detection will decrease your detection probability. Probably it's observer bias or temperature or weather, etc. But to circumvent that problem, sinabi to ni Cynthia kanina, gumagamit kami ng species distribution modeling to address this population and Linnean shortfall. How about places where we've not surveyed? So this is an example of how the methodology or the system works. We use maximum entropy as a software to employ this analysis. We gather the environmental layers, maybe hydrology, temperature, precipitation. Merong global data set yan, galing sa, ano ang tawag dito? Sa GBIF at saka sa World Clim. You download that. Ang makikita nyo mamaya, may mga grids yung pinakita ni Cynthia. Yun ay 1 square kilometer ang resolution. Tapos in-overlay namin yung species occurrence data. So if you're familiar with the face recognition software sa Facebook, or if you have a Mac, pagka meron kang photos, itatag mo yung sarili mo doon at yung artificial intelligence will sort out the photos and say, ito lahat ng photos mo, ito lahat ng photos ng jowa mo, etc. So yung species distribution model works the same way. So kung yan yung occurrence niya, i-overlay dun sa environmental layers to give you a prediction of potential occurrence of that species. In this case, meron siyang, nakikita niyo ba yung on your left, yung probability of potential occurrence, 1 being highest, 100%, 0 being not possible at all. So there's 0 probability. So here we're showing that across Leyte, this species might occur in all of these places, and we've tested this many times over. We went to these places and voila, it's there. Rather than just rely on dating old records. No? So that was useful for us, species distribution modeling. And then bukod doon, kasi nga marami siyang layers ng pictures na isa-sort out na. Yung point na naandun yung nag-occur yung species na yon, marami rin siyang bioclimatic layers na in-overlay namin. And here we can show the different responses of the species occurrence ito on the different bioclimatic parameters, say annual rainfall, annual precipitation, elevation, maximum temperature during the warmest month, etc. We use about 26 bioclimatic conditions. This is an example that we've done for Mindanao. Using that, for each species, we model its distribution, and this we've amalgamated the different species distribution models, at least for 18 species, I think this is. And so makita mo for two species magpinsan na kingfisher, magkaiba sila ng requirement. On the right, on your left, makita mo this species, Actinoides sombroni, requires large tracts of the habitat for it to survive. Ito yung survival envelope niya. In other places, paunti-unti, pero it would not survive generally. Pero yung kanyang kamag-anak na Six argenta, silver kingfisher, happy na siya na maliliit na patches ang mabubuhay siya. So in other words, if you look at this two species, parehong kingfisher, magkaiba sila ng requirement. And this is one species, two species. No? Let's go to another species, looking at the different survival envelopes. Physedula basilanica at saka bleeding heart. Magkaiba talaga sila. Merong gusto, okay lang sila ng maliliit na patches ng habitat. Yung iba, mas gusto nila ay large tracts of land, of habitat. Pagdating sa tanim, sa puno, ganun din. These are same Shorea, magkakaiba sila ng behavior. No? Now, if you have that, we've amalgamated 18 threatened species and endemic species of Mindanao, and this is how it looks like. It seems that nagko-compact, nag-congregate lahat nung nag-compact lahat ng survival envelopes of 18 threatened endemic Mindanao species in eastern Mindanao. So let me backtrack a bit. Pag tinignan mo yun, you know, incidentally, yung kung saan sila nagko-congregate yun, ay kung saan may natural forest na natitira. No? Let me backtrack a bit now. This is the 1990s. We projected it. We used the old data and the old forest cover or land cover to show that in the entire Mindanao island seemed to be a haven for all 21 threatened species. Pero by 2010, there's a drastic change or contraction that has happened. And this is due to the change in forest cover. And incidentally, yun na nga, yung natitirang gubat, yun na lang yung ano yan. But incidentally also, yung natitirang survival envelopes of threatened species in Mindanao is also prime spot for your mining. These are existing mining tenements. And incidentally, Eastern Mindanao is also the timber corridor of the Philippines. So this is where sinasabi ng mga kasama natin na yung decision making, if we can't communicate our science, it doesn't matter. So again, this is maybe a nice balance between science and conscience. By the way, pareho sila ng spelling. So looking at that, the other methodology that we use is katulad ng ginagawa ni Cynthia. We look at, we do remote sensing. And in here, suffice it to say that looking at the bleeding hearts of Mindanao, obviously lumalabas dito na in the last 10-15 years, we've lost, ang annual loss in Eastern Mindanao is the equivalent of 150 SM MOAs. I don't know if you can imagine that. When you go to Palawan, very close to my heart, we again look at about 30 threatened endemic species, just to look at it from a, pardon the pun, bird's eye view. Tingnan mo na yung zoning for Ican does not correspond with the requirements, conservation requirements of key species on your right, yun yung red. So there needs to be change in the policy. But then when we look at changes in forest cover, this is the Mount Mantalingan protected lands, protected area. Obviously, sa report, sa report nila, tumaas from 50 to 90 yung kanilang management effectiveness. But look guys, over the last 10 years, period of 2007 to 2009, 2019, kita nyo na the annual loss is about 2,600 species, 2,600 hectares. So if we extrapolate, this is how Mount Pantalingan would look like in the next 2050. So again, this is how I think the methodologies that we use. Hindi la, ginagamit natin yung foundational species ecological elements, but we elevate that to inform management. So look at Palawan, and then just last point dito, in one of my projects, especially National Geographic, we looked at the survival envelopes for the critically endangered bleeding hearts. At tumalabas dito, this lowland forest obligate seems to be, its habitat is being degraded at an alarming rate, and therefore ang kanyang ang lumalabas na based on our study ay nagmamigrate siya dun sa high elevation forest. Ganun, and you see na yung kanyang survival envelopes follow the movement of the forest. Hindi siya gumagalaw, kundi nawawala sa baba at natitira dun sa taas. No? Ganun din sa ano naman, sa tawag dito, sa Tamaraw. And here, the methodology here is just, I've asked my students to collect shit. Pinapulot ko lang sila ng tae. At for every tae na mapulot nila within the range, ay nilagyan ng GPS bawat tae. And then we've collected those and mapped them out. And this is how it looks like, the result. Here, we're showing that over just 10 years, nag-contract yung suitable habitat for the Tamaraw. And this should give alarm bells. And we've identified, key areas that are potential for restocking and so on. Mukhang moderately suitable yung mga habitats na yan. So what I'm trying to say here is that when we do this, it's also important to look at the different bioclimatic conditions, hindi lang presence, absence. Maybe there are bioclimatic parameters that affect its distribution or its presence. In this case, in the case of Mindoro, almost all of its lowland forests have been obliterated. Yung natitira na lang na forest na intact, if you like, has been in the high elevation. And if you look at the green, the purpley things, shapes there, yan yung restoration, if you like, but really these are plantations, yung mga citrus, etc. So these areas do not replace the original forest. So something that perhaps students can help elucidate. And finally, may mga species na hindi habitat yung kanilang yung driver ng kanyang endangerment. In this case, we've tested we use the same methodology but in Siargao. Makita nyo, ito yung survival envelope in 1994, naging scattered at contracted by 2010. And we looked at the coverage and the change in cover. Wala namang halos na wala. Kita nyo, napansin nyo? Lumiit, pero wala namang masyadong change sa habitat. So, hindi habitat ito. So, one of my PhD students did hunter's interview, and we've established that the contraction of the survival envelopes of the species was driven by bushmeat demand. Ibig sabihin, kinakain, hinahunt yung mga buhay ilang. So, what does that tell us? I think this is a balance between, science and conscience, and that we should shift from just looking at species and ecology to looking at the different values of of the ecosystem and the components of the ecosystem therein. Ang problema kasi, the fundamental flaw that we have in the real world is that yung ating ecosystems, hindi naman siya kasama sa GDP eh. Ang GDP natin, ang what counts is that kung may makukuha kang fish, yan sasama. Pagka may makukuha kang timber or minerals, yun ang kasama sa GDP. Pero hindi niya sinasama yung ecosystem services. Puro production of goods and services lamang ang kinakount sa ating planning sa economic system. So, how do we then put value on the ecosystem services, flood prevention, etc., into that conversation is something that perhaps not only biology and ecology students can contribute to society, but also illuminating this area, which is gray, which is now very, very useful. Bueno naman kung may 100 species ka, ano naman yung kinalaman yan sa ecosystem service? So yun. Okay ba yun? Pasensya na. So in short, it's evidence-based management. You use your data, your science to inform management at yung balance ng science and conscience. Yun po. Salamat.
Thank you, Sir Aldrin. That was a very enlightening short presentation. No? So let's go back dahil baka gutom na sila yung ating panel of experts. So let's go to the question and answer segment of this focus group discussion. We already have a question here, though it's not really related to ecology and conservation, but this is very interesting because this is connected to career. So from E.B. Perez Belen from UP Diliman. So magandang umaga po. Ano po ang pagkakaiba na pagtatrabaho sa university, academe, or professorship at pagiging head ng conservation NGOs based sa experiences ninyo? What are the pros and cons o kaya fun aspects and difficult aspects of it? I would like to ask Ma'am Mundita about this. Ma'am, your comments on this?
Thank you, Eric. Surprise. Actually, I've never worked in the academe. And I've never headed an NGO, actually. So it's a surprise question for me. I've always worked in government, and now I'm working in an international governmental organization. But maybe I can respond to that in the way that I have experienced it, working with the academe and working with conservation NGOs. As I mentioned previously, in developing policies, we deal, the academe mostly has the science of it. No, we expect the academe to come out with the scientific information that we need, but with NGOs, they not only provide the science, but they provide the advocacy as well. So they help us communicate the science. There seems to be in the way that we work with them. That's how the difference is. On the presentations that were provided, I've seen how like with Aldrin, maybe the question should be addressed to Aldrin, but his presentation is looking at the bigger picture. But you have Rainier, who has more species specific information, which eventually would have to lead to a more holistic view, which will provide us the basis for policy advice or policy making. Maybe later on, because I can cite some examples where the information that they have provided has been useful to us, to me, in my experience when I was with the DNR previously and until now, with the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. So we keep on engaging these experts on to be able to provide us that science-based the data that will provide us a more informed basis for decision making. One example that I can provide is when on deciding on which areas to protect. In the past, they've had, the information that they could provide, especially the species survival envelopes that Aldrin mentioned. That's very important information. Before, when I was still with the DNR, we had the key biodiversity areas were important information that provided me some basis on which areas should be established as protected areas. But eventually, there were also other uses, no, that were present, and we could not, yung masyadong malawak, marami, parang sabi nila, puro key biodiversity areas naman yung Pilipinas eh. So what, is there room for some other land uses like residential, agricultural? So if you determine, if for land use decision making, it's important that you have this information from the academe. So there's more pressure for academe to come out with the science. And then for the conservation NGOs, we expect that they would help us communicate the science so that eventually it could be transformed into something that's more useful to government and to the business sector as well. So maybe I will stop with that, and so that others can also respond.
Thank you, ma'am. If a follow-up question, ma'am, kasi from jumping, you jump from the government to the international organization. So, ma'am, what would be it's still in connection to this question, yung pros and cons, ma'am, and the difficulties you've faced from going from the government to an international organization? Just a follow-up question.
Okay. Well, I've always joked na before I used to report in the national government, I used to report to just one minister. But we work now in the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, I have to work with 10 ministers now within the 10 countries. But other than that, you get to have of course a broader perspective, and you find that there are that you are not alone. You find that there are issues that one country cannot address by itself. That you can have if you share this information, the challenges are sometimes similar across the 10 member states. Also, I have more need for information on interconnectivity. I appreciated the presentation from Rainier, for example, about the crocodiles that are moving not only within the Philippines, but they're moving across the Philippines, like marine turtles, which used to be my interest, and which is now becoming somehow provides that basis for greater cooperation across countries in Southeast Asia. The work that we are doing with the the work we are doing with the Philippine Biodiversity Conservation Society, the information that we need. For example, the study that was provided by the study that was released by J.C. Gonzalez on the genetic connectivity between the hornbills in Tawi-Tawi and the hornbills in Indonesia and Malaysia. Those are important scientific information that provides us the basis for more cooperation. Information on valuation. We need that now more than ever. The data that was provided by Aldrin, for example, and Cynthia. when I was still with the DNR, when we decided whether Summer Island Natural Park, for example, when we were trying to decide whether this should be a park or not, the area is also rich in aluminum. So, in bauxite. So, for us to be able to decide, ano ba yung mas matimbang, yung bauxite o yung biodiversity? Yung unang results ng study ng valuation, mas mababa yung value ng biodiversity because there was not enough basic scientific information that would allow the economists to increase the value or to estimate the total economic value of the biodiversity. So, pero later on, tumaas kasi may mga non-use values na consider, no? And, this is something across Southeast Asia that is needed. So, in my experience, and the national government, I was able to build on that experience in national government when I moved to an international body. So, but one thing is the same. I still depend on the available, the best available science that can be provided by my colleagues who are really focused on that at this point.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir Aldrin, I would like to ask that question to you as well. Sir, difference between the academe and working for conservation. Pros and cons, what's fun and what's difficult?
Well, I suppose in this room, ako rin yung hybrid. I can cross from sa umaga, nag-masquerade ako na NGO worker. Sa gabi, ako naman ay teacher. So I can move within those two spheres. Ang difference lang kasi is that sa academia, you have to think academic, and therefore yung rigor, yung advantage, yung rigor of scientific discipline ay nandoon, which I gladly use and transfer to my organization. In fact, the other advantage is that I think 80% of our staff are all my previous students sa graduate school. So, yun yung maganda. But in the NGO, ang problema, ang difference is that academia can also translate the information at maitawid nila sa government, for example, sa stakeholders. Kaya lang, hindi yun ang kanilang main remit. Yung kanilang bread and butter is instruction, research, at saka extension. Di ba? Alam natin yan. Pero 1/3 lang yung extension. But that is the advantage of being in the NGO. Sabi nga ni Ms. Mundita, na may advocacy siya, may naisusulong siya na ano. And those two platforms I take advantage of. Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you, sir. And another question from my personal secretary, no? So in the groundworks, how were you able to fully encourage the local communities to conservation work? I think this is a very big problem when it comes to conservation work, encouraging the local community to participate or at least be interested in what we are doing. Ma'am Cynthia, your ideas on this?
Sa akin, kailangan talaga na bumababa ka talaga sa community. Important na makilala kanila at makilala mo rin sila. At yung hindi ka lang na pangalan lang, na very vague. So nakatulong talaga nung nagsisimula yung work namin sa Kalayan na nakababa talaga kami doon. We stay there for months, for weeks. Hindi lang to do surveys but also to do education work sa mga barangay, sa mga sitio. Makakausapin namin sila. At yung kunyari yung gumagawa kami ng wildlife sanctuary, pati yung mga landowners, pinupuntahan talaga namin para i-explain sa kanila kung ano yung gusto namin gawin para maintindihan din nila kung unang-una sino kami at bakit namin ginagawa at bakit nila kami kailangan pagkatiwalaan doon sa proseso. At the same time, para rin maintindihan nila na yung benefits din yun para sa kanila. So, yun, nakatulong na talagang kilala namin sila at hopefully kilala rin nila kami na kahit sila Ate Sol, sila Lala, na matagal na silang hindi bumabalik from 2004, 2005 sila nandoon sa babuyan, naaalala pa rin nila kasi para alam nila na sila yung nagsusurvey dati, tapos may mga anecdotes sila. So dahil doon na-earn mo rin kasi yung trust ng community, yun, napakalaki niyang talagang foundation na kailangan mong i-establish.
Thank you, ma'am. Another perspective on that, Sir Rainier?
Sorry, ano nga bang tanong?
How are you able to fully encourage the local communities where you're doing your work on conservation? How do you encourage them? How do you ask them to participate in general?
Actually, ginagawa namin ngayon is to involve them as citizen scientists. Some of our people's organization helps us in radio tracking, tapos sila yung huli ng crocodiles, and they adopt the tourism sectors ng locations na like what we did in Siargao when we released crocodiles in Siargao. So we developed a people's organization and they handled the ecotourism. So far, ecotourism was not been fully implemented, but we already trained them. And some of them are involved in citizen scientists. That's somehow we do it conservation with them.
Thank you, Sir Rainier. So another question from Russell Venturina of the University of Santo Tomas. I'd like to address this to Ma'am Sol, and if Ma'am Indira is still around. How can conservation management be effective if ang kalaban natin ay money and power from the opposing stakeholder? Ma'am Sol, your ideas on this?
Kalaban o kauban, yun lang yung hindi. Depende yan sa nyo ng data, yung yung analysis ng mapaintindi yung mapaintindi yung private organizations or private corporations. Yung paano mag-work yung kanilang business with conservation, biodiversity conservation. Kasi with my corporation, with EDC, we do conservation seriously. So, kumbaga, part of our bulk of our budget is sa CSR is with conservation efforts like our binhi, like our BCMP, like our Philippine Eagle projects, like our forest flagship species initiatives. Madami pa, pero yun yung kung mapaintindi lang yung top management on how important biodiversity conservation is, yun yung yun yung talagang magpupush na mag-work yung private or corporations with conservation. Yun lang talaga yung dapat maintindihan nila.
Thank you, Ma'am Sol. Ma'am Indira, are you still there?
Nandito pa.
Yan pa.
Sige. I think engagement, participation, and immersion. Sa amin naman, hindi naman kami big organization, but how did we do that is because we have really community participation. When we fought against the coal-fired power plant that is supposed to be erected in front of Rasa Island Wildlife Sanctuary, doon ko talaga naramdaman na parang in respect sa cockatoo, parang ito yung ginawa niya to the people which have not been understood in the long years, no? Pero ngayon, because of the presence of the cockatoo, parang nakatulong yun na para talaga pigilin yung coal-fired power plant. Kasi mismo yung data na nakukuha talaga ay galing mismo sa community. So when they wanted to refute our data, na galing sa Katala Foundation, they could not do that because the community owns the data. So, kung na-engage sila sa simulat sa pool, Bisaya ba yun? Tagalog. Sa simulat sa pool, ay parang meron na ring ownership sa data. So, sila yung nakikipaglaban, and when we spoke in front of the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development, and when they approved it at the first discussion, when I broke into tears talaga, the community was really there also behind me. Parang na-feel ko na I didn't waste any moment of immersion when we started the project way back in 1998. So yun ang strong point talaga if you have strong community participation.
Thank you, Ma'am Indira. Maybe I'll also ask this question to Ma'am Mundita. No? So, how can our conservation management be effective? Then the reality is that there are stakeholders also. There's an opposing stakeholders with the money and power that might oppose those conservation management policies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, first, well, if there's some good intention, kasi pag greed talaga ang umiiral, wala kang pwedeng gawin doon. Pag sakim talaga sila, then you have to address it through regulations, enforcement. You have to be really tough, no, especially with the regulatory agencies, no. But for some moneyed, or some private sector who have the funds, sometimes naman, they really want to do good. They just don't know how to go about it. And right now, we have an upcoming webinar series on the economics of biodiversity, which is actually building a strong case for investing on biodiversity. Why should they invest? And we're not just talking about corporate social responsibility. We are now looking at why the private sector, why those who have money to invest, why should the business sector, why should they include biodiversity or take into account biodiversity in their business modeling? So yun na yung trend natin ngayon. Again, of course, as I mentioned, that valuation is a step towards that, total economic valuation, and you will not be able to do that without the basic sciences. So, importante na, we have, keep on working. Kanya-kanya naman tayong trabaho no? So, for your students, eventually, who would venture into the more detailed science, that's also important along the way. That's the basic information that we need to do total economic valuation, and then eventually to be able to counter the business sector who are not aware of what the value is in their businesses. That eventually, if they don't take care of this, their business will not be sustainable. So yun. So we are now, of course, we will invite you to this upcoming webinar series. I hope everyone will also be able to participate in the discussions. We will we will have speakers on the Dasgupta report. So yung on the economics of biodiversity. So it will be a very engaging conversation, and you will be able to truly see what you are doing on the ground is already, how it can impact eventually at the higher decision making level.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you po. Hopefully, kasi baka mag-doktor lahat yung mga estudyante ko. So hopefully may ma-encourage sa kanila through this webinar, and of course your webinar series as well. Kasi almost all of my students gusto nila mag-doktor eh. So, how do I say this? So, we started with the Miss Universe question. So, let's end this focus group discussion with another Miss Universe question. No? So, I would like to ask our panel about of course, maybe a little bit on the challenges on what they are facing in their conservation work, and their advice to our students who wish to also pursue conservation work as a profession in the near future. So let's start, Ma'am Cynthia.
Ano ulit? Sorry, Eric, can you repeat the
Then challenges
question?
with your conservation work, and what would be your advice to our students for those who wish to pursue a career or a profession in conservation work?
Okay, siguro yung tips, sabi mo naman na yung mga karamihan sa mga students mo ay gusto maging doktor. So,
Yes.
pwede ka naman maging doktor. Si Doc Aldrin, doktor yan. Hindi nga lang nanggagamot. Si Dr. Lim, doktor din siya. Pero seriously, kung gusto niyo maging medical doctor, pwede niyo pa rin naman i-tie up with wildlife conservation. Lalo na ngayon, nakikita natin, experience natin with this pandemic. Ang ACB, they're promoting yung One Health, One Environment, kung saan ililink natin ang conservation with environment, economy, and our health. So pwede niyong gawing platform din yung medical career ninyo para makatulong sa conservation, pag-aaral ng mga zoonotic diseases, at kung paano pa natin mas mako-conserve yung biodiversity on the ground for people's welfare din. Yung challenges, funding is always a challenge. So kung gusto ninyong tumulong sa mga organizations, lalo na dyan sa Iloilo, sa Panay area, marami dyan mga conservation organizations na nangangailangan ng tulong, volunteers, funders. So I encourage you na tumulong sa mga conservation organizations. Yung gusto ko lang i-address yung question, EB, Perez Belen. Oo, kailangan mo ng permits kapag magsa-survey ka sa mga communities and indigenous groups. Magre-release ang BCSP ng poster to address itong mga concerns about permits. So, pakiabangan na lang sa website at sa Facebook page ng BCSP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am. Rin sa pagpa-plug. Ma'am Indira, the challenges that you have faced in conservation work and your advice to our students.
When we started the work, we thought basically ang pinakamahirap siguro trabaho yung community. But you know, ang pinakamahirap na trabaho in this work is dealing with the government sometimes. Kasi alam ni Achi yun na you know, yung tenure nila na kung ilang years lang sila, tapos naka-start ka na maka-establish nun, tapos aalisin, tapos bago na namang perspective at bagong priorities, tapos balik uno ka na naman. Kasi sa community, nandyan sila palagi sa community, nakukuha mo yung nila, feelings nila, nakukuha mo yung, in fact, nakaka-influence ka ng passion nila sa citizen science, na develop mo yung passion nila towards the same conservation goal, no? So dealing with the government, that it's really very challenging for us, I must tell. And the most rewarding one is really working with the community. Ang advice ko sa mga students ninyo, kung hindi lang pandemic, please go out, no? Go out in your own communities and in your own very little areas. Please talk and develop that or reconnect again. Kasi doon lang naman yun magsa-start, di ba? Sa first beauty pageant question kanina na anong naka-inspire mo, parang nakikita mo it all boils down from childhood, from the influence of your parents, or ano ang upbringing mo. So just go out and then feel kung ano ba talaga yung immediate need, no? Hindi naman kailangang expensive eh. You can start with small things and then everything will follow na. So just develop that passion kasi mahirap ang conservation work. It really requires stamina. Sabi nga nila, grit daw, grit, di ba? The passion for a long-term commitment. So sana yun din ang ma-develop ninyo. Kasi we did not increase the population of the cockatoo in 2-3 years. Because we stayed there for more than 20 years, then we are able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Indira. Ma'am Sol?
Yan. Ang challenges, pahirap yung dati kasi wala kang fundings, pero ngayon magagawa mo na ngayon yung yung gusto mong gawin kasi available readily na yung funds na nandyan lang, gagawan mo lang ng paraan, gawa ka lang ng proposal, tapos nandyan na siya eh. So, hindi limiting factor na yung factor yung pera, no? So, kung talagang in love ka sa wildlife, conservation, yun lang yung kailangan mo na para ma-pursue mo yung gusto mo na maka-contribute ka sa conservation sa Pilipinas. Yun lang.
Thank you, Paul. Sir, sorry. Last na natin, sir. Ma'am Bundita, the challenges that you have faced and your advice to our students. Ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. You the challenges that I've faced and still facing is yung sometimes yung silo thinking ng mga sectors, because most often yung pressure sa biodiversity is hindi nanggagaling sa biodiversity conservation sector, but it comes from outside. So tama yung sinasabi ni Cynthia na kahit na mag-doktor sila, kahit mag-businessman sila, kung sa loob nila gusto talaga nilang they have this they have this appreciation for protecting biodiversity, and they see the value of that of doing that, in whatever career they want to pursue, then they would actually be helpful kasi ipapasok nila yon. They would, kung ano man yung plano nila sa negosyo nila, sa plano nila sa pagdodoktor nila, nakapasok, naka-embed na sa kanilang isip, tsaka sa puso yung value ng pag-protect ng biodiversity. Alam nila na pag hindi nila ginawa ito, maapektuhan yung kanilang hanap buhay, maapektuhan yung sustainability ng kanilang negosyo, o yon. So just with that thinking. So ngayon, ang isang strategy namin ngayon, or isang action towards that, is yung mainstreaming biodiversity sa iba-ibang sector. We are trying to work with the agricultural sector, with the medical sector. Lalo na ngayon, nabanggit ni Cynthia, tama yun, we are now focusing on One Health, which is yun nga, kasama na yung environmental health din sa pag-uusapan to prevent future pandemics. We now need to take into account yung biodiversity, environment in our decision-making process. Kahit ano man yung career na gusto nilang i-pursue after this. So, importante so I appreciate you, Eric, for organizing this. It's always we always, we hope that, this whatever discussion that we have had impacted, had created an impact to your students that would last them a lifetime. Nakamute ka.
Unmute. Thank you, ma'am. Dahil kahit salamat po rin sa pag-support. Kahit alam ko medyo gutom na po kayong lahat. But Sir Aldrin, the challenges that you have faced and the advice that you could give to our students.
Challenges na bigay na ng mga kasama, lalo na yung it's not the lack of resources. Meron tayo ngayon. Lumalabas na nga sa ears natin yung pera, kaya lang mababa yung uptake. I suppose ang major challenge, and this is a lifelong challenge, is kasi ako naniniwala na conservation begins with conversation. Kung hindi maganda yung conversation mo, hindi mo maidadala sa conservation. And when I say that, I'm alluding to that goal of establishing shared value. If we cannot establish a shared value, kung sino man yung stakeholder natin, be it communities, government officials, or business sector, kung hindi natin ma-establish yung shared value ng biodiversity at yung ecosystem service nung kunyari water, etc., hindi tayo walang lalabas sa conservation. Until we do that, we achieve that shared value, hindi natin magagawa yan. So yan ang major challenge sa ngayon for us. And yung future ay, to me, no research is too small. Cynthia alluded to this. If you go to page 312 of the 5th edition of Odom's book, yung niche, yan yung occupation natin eh. So lahat tayo merong kanya-kanyang may kanya-kanyang role sa society, and therefore let's nurture that. Ang mahalaga sa atin, ang forward-looking natin should be that I think a major challenge for us is to strengthen conservation science. Yung conservation science that will make decision makers to choose the right path, to choose the path where yung decision no harm will be done on both nature and people, and therefore, in other words, achieving that planetary health. Yun yung first. The second part of that pillar is yung pag naayos natin conservation science, where most of the people here are involved with, ma-improve din natin yung conservation practice. Kapag na-improve natin conservation practice, lalabas yung mga true conservation leaders. So, ano yung conservation leadership. At the moment, sadly, this government, your government, doesn't have conservation leadership. Conservation is at the bottom, bottom of the barrel. Ang tawag dito, COVID crisis is just at the tip of the iceberg. There's a bigger crisis that is looming that's always forgotten: biodiversity and climate crisis. So let's keep your eyes on the prize. Do well in your studies. Huwag kayong gumaya sa amin nung bata kami, mga school bukol kami. But then we shifted. We saw the light of day. Nagkaroon kami epiphany. And now look at where we are now. So may pag-asa kayo. Ilang beses akong na-kick out sa UP. So if I was able to if I was able to make it, mas magagaling kayo. Yeah, yun lang po. Gandang hapon.
Thank you, Sir Aldrin. Sorry po for the overtime that we have right now. So once again, I thank you the panel of experts that I have invited. Ma'am Mundita, Ma'am Sol, Ma'am Cynthia, Ma'am Indira, Sir Aldrin, and Sir Rainier for giving us the opportunity to asking you questions, sharing your knowledge and your experiences in the field of conservation biology. So